Paul Cowling with Film Independent, and welcome to the 2024 Director's Close-Up. Before we start, I'd like to take a moment to thank all the partners that make Film Independent's important work possible. Thank you to this year's incredible supporters of the Director's Close-Up, the Directors Guild of America, SAG Indie, and IMDb Pro. And thank you also to our 2024 Film Independent Spirit Awards supporters, premier sponsor Lavazza Coffee, principal sponsor IMDb Pro, and official partners Bullet Frontier Whiskey, Fiji Water, Petite Fleur Champagne, and Stella Artois. We so appreciate your support and devotion to the independent film community. And also a reminder that the DCU is going to continue one more week next week. Spirit of Independence session, which is usually in person, is going to be online next week at 12 noon Pacific. That's on February 14th. So we'll send a reminder to everyone. And then don't forget that the DCU continues in person at the DGA starting February 12th and continues with another night on the 21st and then March 1st. All details can be found on our website, filmindependent.org. If you don't have a pass for that, you can still register. But today we're joined by the nominees for Best Screenplay at the Spirit Awards. And wow, what a group it is. Here with us tonight are, first up, David Hemmingson, writer of The Holdovers. Hey, David, how are you?
Good, how are you? Good to see you.
Great, thanks. Thanks for joining us. Where are you tuning in from?
Los Angeles, yeah, where it's incredibly rainy. We've almost been washed away.
I know. It's been so wet, I know. Next up, they are the writing team behind Birth, Rebirth, Laura Moss and Brendan J. O'Brien. Hey, Laura. Hey, Brendan. How are you?
Hi. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for joining us. Where are you joining us from?
LA. We're New Yorkers normally, but we're in LA for a short stint, enjoying the torrential floods. Yeah. Great.
Thanks for joining us. Laura's also directed the film, so wearing two hats here. And also, Laura's nominated for the Someone to Watch Award at the Spirit Awards this year, right? So several nominations. Congratulations. Next up is Emma Seligman, co-writer and director of Bottoms.
Hello.
Hey, Emma. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Where are you tuning in from?
I'm tuning in from New York.
Welcome. Thanks for staying up a little later than the rest of us for this.
No problem.
Now, your co-writer, Rachel Sonot, sends her regrets. She's shooting today, right?
She is shooting. So she wishes she could be here. She's very excited and missing out. Yeah, she's excited and sad at the same time.
Regulars at the Spirit Awards will also know, of course, that Emma won the John Cassavetes Award back in 2022 for Shiver Baby. So already a winner here. And finally, writer-director of Past Lives, Celine Song, is with us. Hey, Celine.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are
Thanks
you?
for joining us. Very well, thank you. Where are you joining us from?
New York City.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, thanks for staying up late. Also, another thing to mention that David and Celine are both Oscar nominees this year for Best Original Screenplay. So congratulations to the both of you.
Congratulations, Celine.
Finally, our moderator tonight is a very good friend of Film Independent, writer Daniel Waters, whose credits include the cult classic Heathers and the most underrated Batman film, Batman Returns. Hey, Daniel, how are you?
Good, good. Thank you for not mentioning my other credits.
Oh, you told me not to.
I have to keep reminding people.
Oh, I mean, who needs to mention other credits when you've got credits like that? I mean, gosh. So I'm going to step off stage. For those of you know, I'm going to tune in from the sidelines here, and Daniel's going to take it away.
All right, let's get right into it. Your movies are all great, so there'll be no awkwardness, only love. Now, I know many of you directed your own material, but tonight I'll be talking to you as writers. There'll be no questions of lenses and lunch penalties. I want to begin with beginnings. Everyone in Los Angeles has a great idea for an amazing screenplay, but writers actually write them. Writers actually finish them. So take me back to the spark that said, this isn't just a cool idea. This is going to be a Spirit-nominated screenplay, goddamn. You got 8 ideas on the runway. What made your control tower clear this one for takeoff? Celine, why Past Lives right now?
I think it really did come from this one moment in my own life where I was sitting in this bar in East Village, New York, sitting between my childhood sweetheart, who's now a friend, who's come to visit me from Korea, and my husband that I live with in New York City. And as I was translating these two people who don't speak the same language, but I actually speak both of their languages, I was translating not only between their language and culture, but also I realized that different between two parts of my own self. And then I think that it really felt suddenly like I was having a drink with both my past, the present, and the future, all in the same room. And I think that the inception for the film really happened there. And then I think that, you know, it kind of landed in a bit of a maybe pile of like, huh, it was so special to me, but it looks almost invisible. And I'm not sure if anybody else has really experienced something like this or really feels something like this. But I think that while in the maybe pile of like maybe the things I'll get to write, maybe I'll write that one day, it kept occurring to me that like there must be other people who feels that way. There must be other people who have experienced something like that, because even if it's not as dramatic as it is for me, which is of course 2 different languages across the Pacific Ocean, you know, you could really move from like New York to LA, or like, you know, like I have friends who moved from like Missouri to pursue their dream in New York City, and like they also have a piece of themselves that they left behind to someone, someplace, sometime that they left behind. And when you go meet that person who's holding on to that part of yourself for you, you're suddenly speaking to a part of your past. And I think, I don't know, I feel like there was some feeling around that just made me feel like, yeah, maybe I should write it. But I would say that it just really happened in that room, where it just occurred to me that this is a really strange feeling to feel my whole, you know, my time collapse.
That's so fascinating you say that, because I thought the movie has one of the great opening scenes I've seen in such a long time. And you were given in silver platter by real life. I love it.
Yeah, but that's really, you're watching the birth of it in that opening scene. And of course that's the whole movie. But I remember looking up and making eye contact with I almost said audience member, but it's the other people in the bar, and making eye contact with them and feeling like, oh, you guys are trying to figure out who we are to each other, because we're weird looking, right? It's like this very Korean looking guy, Korean American-y person, and then like a white guy. So it's like, who are we to each other? And we're trying to like talk about something. So I think that I think I had a feeling when I was making eye contact with them, that like, oh, they're really trying to figure this out. And what if I actually took the time to tell them about it? What if I actually took this opportunity to explain to them, like, you have no idea who we are to each other. It is a lot stranger and totally ordinary too, you know.
Wow, wonderful, wonderful. Now, back in the pioneered covered wagon days, I was Spirit nominated for the movie Heathers that tried to reinvent the high school genre. 200 years later, Emma, you've reinvented the reinvention with Bottoms. How?
Well, I mean, if it wasn't for movies like Heather, and then like the Heather's effect of all the campy movies in the 90s with like complicated sort of maniacal female leads in high school, like I wouldn't have had the references in my head to make Bottoms. But
I know you're a Mean Girls fan too, which my brother directed. It's a point of contention at Thanksgiving.
I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yes, yeah. It's okay. You like New Order more than Joy Division. I get it.
I have to say, I had a theatrical experience with Mean Girls, so that does stick with me on a level, like seeing it when I was a kid, and that being one of my big like.
It's okay. It's all in the family.
Okay. All right.
I'm good.
That is reference. Yeah, I think I'm really lucky. I wish she was here, but you know, I think I did it with Rachel. Like, I think Rachel Sennett is she's a good friend, but I worked with her on a short film in college, and I think in general with the things I want to make, like, or that I'm excited to do, which is, I love movies and seeing all the genres that exist, that movies that I love, but I've never been able to see myself in. Like, I think that the high school comedy is like one that I have always wanted to see like queer women in. And I think when I met Rachel and I discovered just how funny this person was and how dedicated she was, and she was doing like stand up every night at open mics, and like, you know, was trying to make her own sketches and self-produce, and was really hungry. She was like, do you want to write something together? And I pitched her the one comedy idea I had, because the rest are like seeing queer women in this genre or that genre, but there's like this comedian in front of me. So I was like, here's my comedy idea. It's like, can we do something like Mean Girls, or, you know, Heathers or Clueless, or something that we grew up with, but then also have like fighting, and kind of combine it with like an action adventure kids movie, you know, like where like a guy's saving, you know, the girl, or fighting to save the day. Because I love those high school movies also, even though that's separate from the comedy genre. And that's what started.
Most people satirizing high school movies secretly love high school movies.
Yes, it's a little secret of mine. But yeah, but there was no part that was like, oh, we're gonna reinvent, you know, you're just writing stupid jokes in a coffee shop, and then you're like, no one will ever actually let us make this, you know what I mean? Like this is just, I mean, obviously hope so, but yeah. So that's
that's the best though, not worrying about whether it's going to get made or not. Like finish a document, get something real.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Great. Now, Birth Rebirth is the masterpiece many of you may be least familiar with. Laura and Brendan, how did you choose to inflict this terror upon our psyches?
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, I think it was both sort of a long time coming and then a recent discovery. You know, I read Frankenstein when I was in early high school, and it was the first thing that I'd been assigned in school by a woman that wasn't about marriage and manners and didn't have petticoats, or I guess there probably were petticoats, but they weren't central. And so I became pretty obsessed with it, and obsessed with Mary Shelley herself. And I couldn't help but kind of reread Frankenstein, Victor Frankenstein, in her voice. And so that stuck with me. And then, you know, other things happened in life, and I wasn't necessarily a filmmaker yet at that point. But I always was kind of obsessed with the idea of a Victor Frankenstein that had a uterus that was sort of resisting the constrictions of her own gender, you know, wanted to create something with her mind. Brendan and I have a long story as, you know, co-writers and like many different careers, but at a certain point we were professional screenwriters. We were trying to get our first feature made, and we were looking at our drawer and thinking, what do we have that's confined to a few locations, a few characters, something that's actually makeable as a first feature for me to direct. And I brought this Rose character to Brendan. And I think it's interesting that it's a two-hander, because we're co-writers. And I think as much as there's sort of obvious parallels between me and this genderqueer Frankenstein, you know, I think Brendan was sort of equally the advocate for Celie, who is the mother of the child that Rose reanimates, and a central character in the film.
Yeah, I mean, Laura originally had this idea that was all these notes from prison of the scientist who reanimated a kidnapped little girl and then was explaining to the mother why they had done it. And it was not theatrical, but it was fascinating. And it was something that, you know, we've known each other for a really, really long time and batted around partial ideas of things forever. And it's something that always really, really stuck with me. So when we were looking for something contained and, you know, bluntly cheap and financeable that we could pitch to get made for a first feature, for Laura to direct, this idea really stuck around, and we just kind of fleshed it out together. How do we make it a narrative? How do we make it a story and not just some cool fractions of an idea? So we just
did you write separately or in the same room, or you say you were kind of connected to the two opposite characters? Was there a fight? Was there a conflict of like, well, my Frankenstein versus Judy Ray's?
Well, yeah, we bicker all the time, but I think no, we're pretty aligned in our process. We tend to like iterate together and come up with an outline together, and then Brendan, you you take over for
I
a little.
run away and I write the vomit draft, and it is, 100 pages too long, and there's paragraphs about the patterns on the couch that don't need to exist, and then whittle down, and then Laura will mercilessly just cut it down to a 60-page version, and then we get it to be something in between that someone.
Big fan of vomit draft. Always do vomit drafts. They're the best.
That's my specialty. Yeah.
Now, I wrote a Batman movie that arbitrarily took place on Christmas. Now it gets played in theaters every year. David, you've concocted a true Christmas perennial that's going to be with us every December for the rest of our fucking lives. Now, tell us the tale how this came to be.
Thank you for that. It's weird. It started out about 6 years ago. I had been working in television for a long time, for like 20 at the time.
You're a king. You're a king.
I was an old TV writer, like a session player. I've done a lot of stuff, but I basically really wanted to tell the story. I wrote this pilot called Stonehaven, which is kind of the story of me growing up. It was highly autobiographical about this kid who is a product of a divorce in the late 60s, very acrimonious divorce, and his mom is like a lower middle class family. My mom was a nurse; she's a nurse, but kind of really struggling to keep to make ends meet, and ends up going to this prep school that his father is teaching at. He hadn't seen his dad in a long time, which is actually my story. And there's another character, an uncle character, who is sort of a hugely important influence on this kid, me, based on my actual uncle. So I wrote this highly autobiographical TV pilot called Stonehaven, and my then agent, now manager, who has, I think, the best taste in the worst bedside manner in Los Angeles, kind of like read it, and he was like, oh, this is really kind of emotionally evocative. This is interesting and kind of rich and funny and sad, and it's kind of propulsive. It's a really unique and interesting thing. I've never seen anything set in a prep school like this in 1980. That's interesting. I was like, oh, thank you. He goes, I mean, we can't do a fucking thing with it. I mean, it's completely unmarketable. No one will ever buy it or make it, but I'm glad you wrote it. I'm glad you had that experience for yourself,
Oh, yeah.
And so I went off and did another TV show, actually, called Whiskey Cavalier, and I didn't forget about it, but I put it aside. And one of the reasons I'm still with Matt Solo, my now manager, is that he gave it to a client of his, who was a mutual friend of Alexander Payne's. He knew Alexander Payne very well. They'd gone to film school together. Alexander read it. I had not known that Alexander had wanted to make a movie about a boarding school for like a dozen years. Basically, this kind of, his blog line was this sort of odiferous, ocularly challenged professor, this kind of pungent heap of rumpled corduroy at the school, sticks around with these 5 kids over Christmas. That was sort of the log line that he gave me. But he called me up out of the blue, and I had no idea, he even had the pilot, and I thought I was being pranked by a buddy of mine, and I almost hung up because I had a friend who called me rather consistently and pretended to be various cultural luminaries, and I never bought it. And he called me once, and I actually thought he was Coppola. So he managed to lure me down the primrose path for like a few paragraphs at that time, and it was like, fuck you, you're an idiot. Why would Coppola call you? I'm just calling for a beer. So I was convinced that I was being and so I almost hung up on Alexander, but then I saw the Omaha area code, and I know that he lives in Omaha.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So I just sort of actually said, are you Alexander Payne? He's like, yeah. Last time I checked, yeah. So he sort of said, would you do this premise? Would you be interested in writing a movie? I don't want to make your pilot. So that dream was born and died immediately when I answered the phone. But he said, can you do something completely different, but set in the same world? And that's how the Holdovers came about.
Oh, wow. And Alexander Payne knows his way around a pen. So was there a land grab? Was there a war, or were you given freedom?
No, it was great. I mean, it was he's one of the most honestly generous and decent like collaborators you can imagine. He sort of said, I don't have this experience. He was great. He's totally honest. Like, I don't have this experience. I know you have this experience. I read your stuff. It feels real. I said, because I lived it, And he was like, great. He said, well, I want to give you free rein, do what you want to do, but I want to hew to this premise, and I'll kind of direct you as a writer. So you write it, but I'll kind of adjust. And so it was, over a series of drafts that I would just kind of get these notes. He would never tell me what to write, but he'd say kind of more of this feeling. And he'd often reference like classic cinema. So I kind of had to go and kind of get a master's in film on the back of Cinephile over at Sawtelle in Santa Monica, and just absorb as many movies as I could to be able to talk to him intelligently about kind of cinema history, because he thinks in terms of kind of cinematic terms. So it was a huge education for me.
What was it? Do you hold your feet to the fire about making it very 70s, the 70s look that the movie has, or was that don't worry your pretty little head, David?
No, he was like, he wanted the tone. Here's the thing. I feel like the look and the feel was absolutely AP, and Igo Brild, who's our director of photography. But I felt from a tonal standpoint and from a pacing standpoint that it was incumbent upon me to understand the cinema, 70s cinema. Plus, he would say things that were from a like 1950 Michael Curtiz movie, and just in terms of a tone or a look or and they hang up, and had to go research and figure it out. So I felt like it was incumbent upon me, if I was going to do it well for him, and I really wanted to do it well, to really saturate myself. So I just went through just tons of Ashby and Altman and Avildsen and Coppola, and then,
Great.
obviously Lucas to some extent, and then on to Italian neorealism and French New Wave. I try to get as much as I could to sort of understand the tone of, pretty much 1958 to 1970. I wanted to understand what was going on cinematically from a tonal standpoint.
That's awesome. Now, such warm and friendly answers. I loved them. They were wonderful. But the Bible and the Rolling Stones make reference to moments of doubt and pain. If you tell me the creation of your spirit-nominated screenplay was 20 pages a day, fun and games, I'm going to be very sad and disappointed. Please make us all feel better and tell us of stumbling blocks, dark nights of the soul, like a car you can't get out of the mud. What's something you had to rewrite and rewrite and rewrite to get right? I'm tired of assigning people. Who wants to go?
Daniel, you're the best. Daniel, you're the best moderator in the whole freaking world. Okay, I'll go first. I'll go first. I think that we're all writers here, so I just think it is not wild to admit that so much of it is really painful, but I think that we just learn to enjoy the pain of it. I think that's the truth. I feel like I think that's how it is. Just it's painful, but then you're like, but after you do it, it's like it's just there's a joy in that. I think the biggest question mark for me was the way that before I even started writing a page of it, because of the way that the bilingualism is such a big part of the story of Past Lives, where actually it is so much about, as I was saying, like you started from this bilingual moment, and it really is a bilingual story, because how the characters are navigating around their bilingualism and them speaking different languages and then trying to learn each other's language and trying to speak each other's language is a part of not just the way that the story has to get told, but it's actually a fundamental story beat and the character beat. So it was really important for the movie to be written in 2 languages, and I speak both Korean and English, and I was going to write a script that's bilingual, but what I realized quickly is that final draft doesn't support any alphabet except the English alphabet, and it's I talk about this everywhere because I'm always like, I couldn't believe that they don't support any other alphabet. But I think at the time, but what that does is that actually more importantly than anything, sort of imply to me, it's kind of an implicit messaging that they're not interested in a story that is written bilingually or that is written in any other alphabet. So it's a kind of a structural thing where it's like it's saying like, I'm trying to write my first screenplay, and they're like, well, structurally, you're not welcome here. If you want to write a script like Past Lives, you're not welcome here. So I think it was
a scandal.
Is it right? Of course, and I think that, and this was, by the way, before I wrote this before Parasite had an amazing moment at the awards and everything. So that movie really made a difference when it comes to movies with subtitles, movies in different languages, when it comes to their commercial viability, right? But for me at the time, I was like, I want to write this story. The story has to be bilingual because it is about this moment. But a final draft, which is an industry standard, right, does not support it. And I think that really felt like some kind of a messaging from the industry or Hollywood that they're not interested in this script. But the truth is that because I was a playwright for 10 years before I wrote Past Lives, what's amazing about being a playwright is that you get really used to the feeling that no one ever does your plays anyway. So many plays that people just haven't done. So, I was kind of like, okay, well, maybe we're not, this movie won't be welcome here, but the script won't be welcome. But, you know, who cares? Like, it was very like, fuck it, you know, it was very like, you know, like, when did I ever write a play expecting someone to do it anyway? So then I just write it. So I think that really was the way that I ended up writing it. And what I used was writer duet.
Oh,
So, you
wow.
know, they support Korean alphabet. Anyway, but my poor AD though, when I was directing it, my poor AD had to learn writer duet because he was like, what is this? Because all he ever knew was final draft.
Wow, you had so many stumbling blocks. You didn't have time to have writer's block. You were too busy.
Yeah,
with this stuff. Wow,
totally.
it's amazing. Are we stuck in our pattern? Are we going to Emma now?
I'm happy to go next. That's so fascinating about final draft. It makes you realize like that's the one thing you do because everyone else uses it, and then you're like, Rachel and I used writer duet so we could co-write at one point.
Yes.
Anyway, this
Yeah.
wasn't an ad for writer duet, but
I feel like
Right.
one of these days I'm gonna get a call from writer duet, and they'll be like, Celine,
you'll do a whole ad campaign.
you have to shoot an
You'll
ad
be their
campaign.
ambassador.
I'm
Exactly.
saying final draft stock is going down.
Yeah.
I love that. Call them out.
It seems like you had so much fun writing bottoms, but there had to be some hard times.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to write. I think tone, which is always the hardest thing,
Oh,
especially
I never met a tone I didn't like.
you know, if you're going to direct it as well, then you're like, well, this has to translate at some point. You know what I mean? This has gotta make sense. And I think a consistent challenge was understanding how grounded. We really didn't want it to feel like we had to care that deeply about these characters because I think we were frustrated that often female characters, especially in comedies, have to have like a full backstory in order to understand why they're being mean or shitty or, you know, flawed. And we just wanted them to be flawed and be funny and not have to like get to know them or get to know their emotions. But as time went on, I don't know, we got more and more notes. And then that sort of became my problem with directing. But I think that was the main real challenge was sort of understanding how to care about these characters and care about the plot and understand the narrative, but also have fun and not care and be absurd and just make something stupid. And I think Rachel was like initially trying to do Wet Hot American Summer, where like we could just like go have a montage, you know what I mean, in a random city that didn't have to make any sense. And we had that at one point, you know, where it made no sense at all. And then, you know, eventually, but then we'd had certain scenes that were really sentimental and emotional. And so it was really hard to kind of find that balance along the way. I also think sort of like, I don't know, I think like figuring out how gay to make it, you know what I mean? Like how to like we knew we wanted our characters to be gay, but we were like, do we have to explain this? Like a lot of notes that we got were like, wait, so does this character know that person's queer, or is she just trying to like turn her? Like, and we just felt like we were then like really forcing in some expositional dialogue where they were like, well, technically I'm bi, but one time and it just felt so wrong. So that was also a challenge was like to make something
such a great advice and it's a great decision just to ignore that kind of stuff.
Yeah, to think about what you want to see, you know, and not what you think you need to explain to some other audience, you know, that might not I get it, I guess.
Was
so
there somebody on the set who said, you know, football players don't wear their jerseys and shoulder pads every day to school, or you would kick those people off the set? They said
no, Rachel kept on saying this is giving football as a concept. It's not actual, and I felt like with our AD, I mean, this is more production, but like when they were trying to cut costs and be like, okay, how many extras do we need? I was like, I don't need, they were like listing how many referees you would have and how many like junior varsity, whatever. And I was like, I've never thought of those people in my head once. And I actually don't know how football works. So I just need to see a few players running around on the field and that's fine. But that was more of a directorial choice when we were cutting down to it. But yeah, how much needs to make sense, you know, and something's an absurd was a challenge that went from writing until the edit, honestly. But yeah, that was always there in the back of my mind. I was like, at some point, this is gonna have to find it's some sort of line that it doesn't cross, you know, some sort of it can't be like this the whole movie. So
That's
yeah.
that's great. That's great. Now, Laura and Brendan, did you ever have that moment where we're going too far, we're not going far enough? I mean, what was
All the time.
Yeah, yeah.
how did you,
Tony,
did you police each other or police yourselves, or?
I think
I
we're
mean, for me, you went over the line, but I loved it. I didn't know my line could be that flexible.
thank you, thank you, thank you. No, I think we do help each other a lot in moments where either one of us could go over the line. I don't think that it's necessarily Laura is always pitching to have like some crazy blood and guts over the line thing and I'm pulling them back. I think we both have things where we need to kind of police each other from getting away from what the tone is, which is like kind of us together. When you ask about Dark Night of the Soul moments, I have one very particularly that comes. We had been, thrashing this thing out for years, and we finally cracked the script, and we were feeling like this real kind of sugar high about it. And what we'll do kind of at every process is we print it out, clear an afternoon, and just the two of us will sit there and read it just out loud to each other, going back and forth on characters and kind of spotting stuff. And at the end, we got to the final page, and this was, years ago, not the draft you would have seen. And we looked at each other and we were like, this is the grimmest, just darkest, unwatchable thing that's very well constructed, but that I wouldn't recommend to anybody. Like if we made the perfect version of that movie, it would just make everyone want to walk into the ocean. And we realized we needed to get some light in there, some humor out of the nonsense in the situation. And people can debate whether we did that to any extent, but for ourselves, we definitely needed to mine some humor in there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's an odd couple humor to the dynamic between these two women in the script, or we think it's funny. But I think that's true. And A Dark Night of the Soul that I remember is, there's a sequence that even through directing it, I called the Devil's Bargain, which is, this woman discovers that her child has been reanimated in this apartment, and very quickly gets on board with co-parenting the child with the Frankenstein, character. So it's a wild turn. And I knew I wasn't interested in that part. I liked the before mystery, and I liked the odd couple dynamic, and I wanted to get through this Devil's Bargain discovery sequence as quickly as possible. But I also knew that the whole movie hinged on it. And if you didn't believe this psychologically, it wouldn't work. And we wrote a million versions of this. At one point, she hit her over the head with a frying pan and tied her up and explained the whole thing. I mean, we had wild versions of this. And I think we finally realized that Judy's character, this mother character, can get on board with this very, very quickly if she's in a real state of denial. If it hasn't properly grieved and is not experiencing the grieving process. So, that the thing she kind of secretly hopes is true turns out to be true, however crazy it is, and she gets on board pretty quickly. So it really affected sort of the grief and loss portion of the movie, which happens before the twist. And I think that was a big revelation for me as a writer. It was like, oh, I mean, to solve the thing, you actually just have to go a few scenes before and solve the other stuff. So I don't know, Brendan, if you remember.
Oh, I remember
that of getting there. But
Wow, that is such a key point, and that's if I had to pick a scene that you'd have to rewrite, that would be the moment. It really is the crux of everything. Now, David, it sounds like you just had a dream experience with a dream director. Surely there had to be one
Dude,
bad night.
Absolutely. Well, it was less about getting static from Alexander and more about exactly what you're talking about grief and loss, and about kind of emotional integrity. You know what I'm saying? Like, I wanted their journeys to be, because it was an Alexander Payne film, but I wrote it, but I knew he was going to direct. And I thought to myself, what needs to happen here is we need maximum clarity without super exposition. We need to land on journeys that really kind of make sense from a heart standpoint, right? As much from a head standpoint, because like Kubrick always says, it's always the feel of it, it's never the think of it. So I'm like trying to feel my way through, and there were two things in particular. One was the monologue that happens in the restaurant when it starts in a close up. It's like actually a very slow pullback where Dominic Sessa, as Angus says, he used to be so much fun. He used to be more than fun. He used to be great. He used to be my dad. And he tells us exactly what he's been going through and exactly what happened to his father. And he tells us how incredibly terrified he is and broken about this whole thing, and how he sees his own future perhaps in his own father, and he's not sure he can outrun it. That monologue took me, I think I rewrote that one for a solid month, at least.
Oh, man.
Where I was just like, and my wife, who I heard just came home, would come into the office where I am right now and like find me at 1 o'clock in the morning, like really overwrought, and she's like, "You all right?" I'm like, "No, I'm not," because like it's no tears in the writer, no tears in the reader. You got to really take yourself there and find that place in yourself. I find that, that all that doubt and alienation I felt as a teenager, I had to kind of bring that up and put it in the context of this character. And the other, in terms of loss and grief, was Mary. So there's a scene in the film that's completely silent, where Mary comes into a bedroom that's being turned into a nursery in her sister's house, and unpacks this mystery box that I've kind of established previously. And we spot it when she's getting ready for the party. She touches it, and then she says to Angus, "Be careful with the box." And then we see her with the box in the room. And inside the box, she takes out these baby shoes, and it's basically her giving away Curtis, who was killed in Vietnam, giving away his baby stuff to her sister, who's about to have a baby. And I just wanted it to have the maximum amount of truth in it. And I kept thinking to myself, because her arc very much was a thought experiment for me, because I was very close to my mother. I lost my mother young. She was young when she died. And it was devastating to me. And I kind of flipped it. And I thought to myself, well, what would it be like for her if she'd lost me? So Mary's whole sort of psychological standpoint was dealing with grief, was dealing with loss. And, her opening up that box and putting that stuff away and having her sister come in, I filled that scene with dialogue at one point. Like you're talking about hitting over the head with a frying pan and explaining, like I got into all the thing between the two of them, and she said what was on her mind and in her heart. And I'm like, you know what? I thought to myself, that wasn't my lived experience. Like certainly emotionally, The Matrix was my mom and myself, but this is a Black woman who lost her son in Vietnam in 1970, and that's not my lived experience. So I need space for the actor. I want to honor the actor, and I want to honor that experience. So I'm gonna recuse myself from words here, and I'm gonna give some emotional direction. And thank God, Devine is as brilliant as she is, because she completely understood. And there's no dialogue in that scene, and there had been tons of dialogue in that scene. It all got pulled out. But what she does in that scene, I think, is one of the most devastatingly beautiful things I've seen in a long time in a movie. I just think she does an amazing job. And I'm deeply in debt to her for that. But that was one of the hardest things. So interestingly enough, one was an intensely verbose page log monologue that took me like a month to crack. And the other one was a completely silent scene that took me like a month or 2 months to crack. So those were the two.
Yeah, well, you're making your moderator cry, so that must be good. David, you've kind of spoiled my next question, but I'm going to do it anyway. So for a brief time, very brief time, screenwriters are masters of the domain. Alone in a room or with a writing partner, we create the best images, the best locations, the best line readings. We're just the greatest. Then if you're lucky, your caterpillar automatically becomes a real movie butterfly. There are inevitable sacrifices, but let's face it, you all hit the jackpot in terms of cast. I'd love to hear how your magical actors transcended your words into something richer, something that surprised and delighted you, something that taught you something new about your own screenplay.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I know you all got great answers. Let's go to Marin Ireland and Judy Reyes in The Birth Rebirth.
I mean, they're both incredible.
And Brenda Wool, by the way, too. Amazing.
Yes, Brita Wool. Yeah, they're all incredible, incredible actors. And I think, Marin comes from the theater, and she has a great respect for the script. And I suggested one line change. It was about, we had a real challenge in our script because we have medical jargon, and we didn't want to dumb it down, but we didn't want to make it so thick that the audience was lost. We wanted them to understand our characters as medical professionals and then follow the plot. And there was just one line where she, your daughter's a perfect match for this blood antigen thing. She said, "Can I just say you don't understand how rare that is, because I feel like the audience needs to hear that piece of information. So that was one just very specific script note. But really they just brought out, you know, the depth in the characters, and it's like incredible to watch the thing that you made up come to life.
When
I don't
you
know.
talk about the scene that you had to rewrite and rewrite, I mean, Judy Reyes sells it so well.
Judy got it. I mean, they're both incredible, and they're both, you know, yeah. She has a young child, you know, a little bit older than the age that her daughter is in the movie, but she just really hooked in. You know, they work very differently. Like with Marin, we spoke intellectually a lot about the characters and about the backstory, and we had written mountains of backstory, and Marin wanted to see it, and I shared it. And then with Judy, she just needed to understand the emotional logic of what was going on. So their questions were very much about, as a mother, I would react this way. Is this in line with this character? So it was just also really interesting to work with two disciplined actors with their own practices that were so different. And thank God turned out to be so compatible. And they were also great with our little girl. You know, having a child on set is a mixed challenge. She was brilliant, but she was 6. So having them kind of help work her arc out with her, and like, you know, they are co-directors of this child. So, you know, they really understood where she needed to go and helped me help them get there.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Well,
I would
yeah.
just say the most satisfying thing with watching both of them work was, I'm sure everyone here has had the same experience where you're agonizing over a chunk of a page of like where a scene turns and will the audience get this? How much more do you have to put in there? And then on the day you watch a brilliant performer do it all with a look. And then you go into the edit and you're like, that is all completely extraneous. This scene just got 5 minutes shorter.
God damn it, I spent all night writing that scene.
Yeah.
And it's so wonderful and it makes you feel so good and so silly at the same time. And they did that so much, both of them. It was so cool to see.
Wow, great. Now, so Celine, you got 2 actors in a death match fighting against each other in the same category.
So good. Perfect. I'm so happy. Happy for that. But I mean, I was just thinking, Brandon, about what you were saying, and I think that it's also, though, I think the reason why that they're able to accomplish that in a look is because of the writing that is there, that they have already digested, right? Because I feel like I think about that in terms of the silent moments or the quiet moments or something that it just has to happen on the actor's face, and it's always it's only compelling because we all know exactly what is going on as the audience, and of course people who are making it needs to know, but I think of course the audience has to know exactly what is happening. And I think about clarity a lot when it comes to actors, and I think that so much of the work is about getting to that clarity with your actor for like what exactly is the thing that the character is going through, and how do you put it on the big screen in a way that everybody in the audience, whether you're watching it on a plane or watching it in a big beautiful movie theater, if they're going to be able to catch it, if they're going to be able to be immersed in it and live in it. And I think that, you know, I mean, first of all, when I feel like, I think this is because I come from a background of playwriting, that like I pretended a little bit more like I was going to be open to ad lib from my actors than I ultimately did. Like I remember literally like my actors asking, because I'm my first time director, so they were like, how would your relationship to ad lib, like, well, how would you feel about it? And then in the rehearsal I was like, yeah, give it a go, give it a try. And then of course when it came to when they actually actually arrived on set and we were doing things, I was just like, no, it has to be verbatim.
Yes.
but it would be also sometimes like I would like hear it as something else, a little bit something else, and I'll be like, no, it has to be verbatim because of this reason. And then actors were like, got it.
Did the actors feel the same way? They're like, oh God, she's right, it has to be verbatim or ad lib.
Yes, I mean, I wouldn't be like, you have to do it this way because of no reason except that I'm your director. I would always tell them why I thought that it should be this word and not that word, right? And then of course, what would be really great is that usually something that's cool is that the actor having chosen the other word is actually revealing about what is scary about the word that they didn't say. You know?
Oh, wow.
So I think that's what's cool about the actors coming to meet it, because I really do think of actors as well, they're like, I sound wild, but like I think it's like they're animals in a way that like the movie is an animal and I'm an animal. So some of it is also about understanding the animal that is each actor. And I feel like you were just talking about this, Laura, about like different actors have a different rhythm and a different approach and a different way that they access certain things. Like there are some things that was really hard for Greta that was easy for Theo, and there are things that were very hard for Theo that was easy for Greta. And I would say, like, I think about when it comes to John Magaro, who's my one of my actors, I remember I would just realize that, like, oh, sometimes if it is too emotionally close to home, then sometimes he would want to choose another word for it, right? So that he can avoid really going there. And all I need to do is to call him out on it, right? So that would be the relationship that I get to have with John and the text, which is that, like, sometimes I'm like, I wonder why you wanted to change that word. And then he'd be like, right, why did I change that word? And I'm like, let's talk about why you want to change that word. And he's like, God damn it, I'll say the word. And then he'll go say the word. And of course, the way he says it, what's beautiful is that his resistance then makes the word have more meaning in the performance. Right. So in a way, I think it's amazing that there is the what is it, the fears and the acceptance and then the resistance and then the opening up, like all of that has to be like the way that this script is working through the actor. And there's this book which I feel like I was thinking about this book so much as I was working on the movie, but I always think about it a lot, and it's called The Actor and the Target. And something that they talk about in it is that, like, well, and it's actually more oriented towards actors, but I found it to be tremendously valuable both as a writer and a director, which is that there's a target that has to get set, and the actors, when they're doing their takes, they're just throwing the dart at the target, right? And if you're a great actor who is really experienced, when you're told what the target is, you're going to hit the target, right? If you're new, you're like really young, or you haven't really acted very much, then I think that you just start throwing targets wherever, right? Or like you might miss more, and then eventually you get to the thing. So, which I think is different when it comes to also how you operate as a script and how you also operate as a director. Because I think when it comes to setting that target, right, it starts with the script. The script is the target, is the original target. And there are some scripts that are written that are, I think that the target is this size. There are scripts that are targets like this big, right? And then there are targets that are like this, where you're like, no, you have to literally thread a needle, like you just have to do this, or the whole script will fall apart. You have to do it like this. And I think that, of course, continues when I'm directing that script, which is that, like, my script is, here, and then of course the script has to sometimes get adjusted. Sorry, the target has to get adjusted based on where the actor is standing or something, right? When it comes, so that they can hit the target, And
I needed you and that book before I did direct.
Oh yeah, it's such a great book, but that's basically the book, which is that, it really is about that. And I think and then I feel like the director's job is to reiterate. And I think this might be because I'm a writer first and foremost, and writing is the thing I've done the longest. But I really took my job as a director of actors as, like, I'm there translating the target, and I'm also shedding light on it, and I'm reiterating what the target is. And then I'm also the person who is checking to see if it hit the target, because they're not often looking at their own performance. So sometimes, and by the way, although later in the production, the actors started to know if they hit the target, which is so magical, right? Because that means that Greta and I know where the target is together, right? So sometimes she'll just hit it, And she'll be like, I just know it's a little off center. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. Just move it a little bit. And she'll be like, got it. And she'll do it and she'll throw it and it'll be dead center, right? But but I feel like that's the way that I think about the script. It's the original target. It's what we're trying to throw. We're just all throwing darts at it, right? And we're all trying to hit the center, you know.
Oh, that's great. Emma, I know your actors are so meshed with your writing. I know there had to be some just from the closing credits, I knew you had some ad-libbing, but
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I feel like
did you have a target?
The target was this big. I thought the target was smaller. And perhaps it was in certain scenes and certain moments. But it was maybe this, and then it adjusted here, and then it adjusted over here. And then I don't know what happened. And then in the edit, it got back down here. But I think improv and ad-libbing is what expanded that in a way that was so challenging as a director. Like I think that Rachel and I, you know, agonized over these jokes for years. And then I think when we talk about cast and how you watch them elevate what you wrote and how they can take it to a place you didn't imagine, which is of course like the best feeling in the world you can experience as a filmmaker, like whether or not you're writing or directing or both, like especially it just, you know, you feel that way about any head of department that takes what you had and then brings it to like a whole other level of depth or emotion or humor that you could have never done on your own. Like I think Io at Debris was really like the pinnacle of that for Rachel and I, even though we're friends and we shared multiple drafts with her over the years. Like it wasn't until we were on set that she not only is such an incredible improviser and can write jokes so much funnier than what I wrote, but also the character of Josie on the page was written as much more timid and passive and just kind of let PJ, who Rachel plays, like take the lead. And while maintaining Josie's shyness and insecurity, Io allowed the character to jump off the page in a way that I don't think anyone expected. Even like people on set were commenting that they read her character as much more quiet. And she was still nerdy and weird and insecure and all those things, but she had so much more personality. And a lot of that came through improvising. And I think that I had to learn, like, as a director, when to know something is better than what I wrote. And I definitely learned that in the edit. But
what about the opposite though?
when you're right.
When an actor like gives you what they think is the best ad lib in the world, and you're like, the script's better, the script's better, the script's better.
I think what's tricky with humor is I'm like, this may be the funniest thing in the world, but like, I know this doesn't make sense. But Io and Rachel are both writers as well. So like when you're having your two lead actors improvise, and this, like, they sometimes actors do go all over and you're like, I'm just gonna let them have it, because it also sometimes in comedy, like also I feel like it helps them find the scene sometimes, like it helps them find the jokes and it helps them find the rhythm that they need. But Io and Rachel always found a way of getting it back to the narrative, like of getting it back to the crux of the scene and to the midpoint of the scene and to understanding the arc and what the character like needs. Every scene, it was so clear to both of them where it starts and where it begins and how we need to exit it. But I mean, there were some times where I was like, okay, we're probably not going to use any of this, but a lot of the time I was surprised by it. I think like my editor put in so much of what they improvised, and I feel like my ego was like, no, like that's not what we wrote. Like that's not as tight as we got it over all those drafts for all those years. But at the end of the day, it didn't matter because that's what we got. So I think Io really.
Yeah, I find with comedy, the laugh always wins. Like, you know, that you can.
It does, and then you test it.
But if you're laughing, it's over. You won.
Yeah, yeah. And they won. I mean, there's so much of the script that Io completely improvised. There's certain scenes that she completely improvised that people like. I get the biggest compliments for. I mean, she should really be on this round table. But yeah, that happened. And then I think also I was most surprised by like the actors that brought the most humanity to the characters. Io did that for sure, but I think particularly with Havana Rose Liu, who played Isabel, and Kaya, who played Brittany, like they kept on asking me questions about like the depth of the scene and like how their characters were feeling. And I think that for me, I was sort of surprised that they took these stereotypes of like these dumb girls or whatever, not that we ever intended for them to be perceived that way, and ended up bringing like a real moral anchor to the movie. Like there are these women who are getting duped, you know what I mean, by Rachel and Io's characters and are being completely manipulated and, used. And then their performances end up, I think, making you care so much for them, more for them, and for like what the consequences of what Josie and PJ's actions are. So I think that that's not something I ever would have imagined, is that I would like feel deeply for like Isabel, for the Havana's character. And I think, I don't know, often her questions were really, she finds out at some point in the movie that she's being cheated on. And we kept on having to crack sort of how genuine her reaction would be, because it was just written as like, oh my God, what? No way. And it just read as so false. And so it was these moments working with the actors that I was like, oh wait, there still needs to be emotional truth in this movie, like sometimes. And like, like we need to still, it needs to still read as these characters going through stuff. And we ended up getting there by Havana like laughing her way into crying, because she needed to end up crying, like ugly crying by the end of the scene. And that was her. So yeah, I think that those moments kind of surprised me with our actors.
That's cool. That's cool. David, I mean, you must have just been like, I'm the luckiest man in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Paul
Were
Giamatti.
you on the set a lot?
Yeah, I was a producer, so I was on the set pretty much for like 90% of the picture.
Oh, great.
But for me, like the second conversation Alexander and I had after I said, yes, I'll write this movie for you. And then we landed on 1970. The next phone call was like, how do you feel about Paul Giamatti? And my answer was, I think he's fantastic. And the really weird thing was that our dads knew each other in college. I found that out when I graduated from college.
Cool.
He was the president of my college. His father was the president of my college when I graduated. So like our dads knew each other, and we were born in the same hospital. We come from the same hometown. So it was like really kind of surreal in that regard. But I kind of cut the movie for him like a suit, because it was very much based upon my uncle and a lot of the kind of Baroque profanity in the movie. Snarling Visigoths and hormonal vulgarians and things. Those were insults leveled at me when I was like 9. So
wow.
I was sort of drafting off of the emotional memory of sort of this kind of hard ass drill sergeant who raised me, who had been like, fought on Saipan and all those other things. But, so he kind of brilliantly commemorated it. And I think because we were from the same town, like I said, our dads knew each other, that he fundamentally understood the character that I was writing in Paul Hunnam. And he's like, I know this guy. He basically, I think he based it on one of his teachers at Choate, but he was sort of like, I know this guy. He grew up around this guy because his dad was president of Yale. Like, so he was able to kind of perfectly commemorate and occupy Paul, like just become Paul Hunnam. There are things that he would do that would amaze me. Like there's certain scenes where you can just see about 5 emotions crossing his eyes, just like cycling through his mind as he's looking in the camera, because he's that brilliant, with a wonky eye, with the sort of, prosthetic thing that he had going on there. So that was just amazing. I mean, everything he did was additive. And he and Alexander have this weird telepathic way of speaking, where it's this halting direction thing, where he'll go up to Paul after take and go, when you did, and you need more of that, and you want me to, yes, but with the sock, not without the sock. Okay, good. And he'd go do it, and it would just be fantastic. With Devine, it was incredible because initially when we were getting auditions, and she was our first choice 100%. From the get-go, because Alexander said, have you seen Dolomite? I said, yeah, I love it. He goes, do you know Devine Jareno? I'm like, yes. He goes, what do you think? I said, utterly fantastic. Yes, please, God, please.
Absolutely.
We had to make sure the schedule was worked out. So we saw other actors, probably about 75 or 80 other actors for the role. And as a producer, I'm watching all the auditions, and I'm noticing that there's a lot of grieving going on. But to me, when you're grieving, oftentimes when you've got displaced grief, it often manifests as anger or humor, like a lot of times we deflect our pain with humor, hence comedy writer, right? We do that organically from a very early age. And then often what we'll do, I think, also is kind of, be angry about things. And she had a lot to be angry about. I mean, if anybody's entitled to despair and rage, it is that character, but she doesn't have it. She comes at it with this really quiet strength that's remarkable. But the idea of her wryness and her comedy chops leading, even in this tragic situation, the way she does it was just spectacular. And she improvised, there's very little improv in the movie, but some of the kind of the riffs where she sort of breaks down, starts cursing a little bit, that was her getting comfortable. And that kind of happens, around the midpoint. So that was a choice that she made, but everything she did, it was just so great. And the fundamental kind of symbiosis of those three characters of Paul and Angus and Mary just worked out so beautifully. And Dom, the kid, I mean, we saw
yes, we all know Giamatti and Divine are going to be great, but
yeah.
how did this kid Dominic
The
speak
kid
to you
showed
as, that said, this guy gets a script, this guy's going to make my work?
We looked at 800 kids, did like a worldwide search, looked at 800 candidates, and not us, but Susan Schottenbecker, and then Alexander and I looked at about 80 auditions again. And there was like one or two other kids, but it was really tough because that monologue that I referenced before, that there's 5 distinct turns in that page-long monologue, as the kid's working through his own sort of psychology and understanding himself.
Was that the audition scene?
Yeah, there was the audition scene, and you'd see kids get it, and I was literally sitting there because I know where the turns are, and I'd go, okay, 1, 2, as I go through 3. No, you missed that one, you missed that one, and then you go, okay, can we adjust? And Alexander and I would talk about it. We kind of post game afterwards, but this audition came in from Deerfield. He wasn't even on the list. He was just a kid in the drama department, not even in the drama department. He was sort of like a kid who had been a hockey player and a skateboarder who broke his femur and started acting, and turned out that he was made in a lab to be a film actor. Like, he just built that way. And so his auditions, first of all, he's got these kind of high cheekbones, and he lights so beautifully. I mean, Igor Brild, our DP, was just like, I just want to light that kid. He said, I just want, please put him on screen because I want to light him, and he found it. I mean, Paul worked with him a little bit.
Did he get 5 out of 5?
He did get 5 out of 5, but he got he got 4 out of 5. And then Paul worked with him, and there were some habits, I think, from high school drama productions that Alexander had to kind of squeeze out of him a little bit and massage out of him, But he never spiked the lens, not once. He never made any of the mistakes that so many young actors make. He just was sort of, it's not like he was born to it, and he was so natural and such a decent person that it just sort of kind of flowed out of him. And he'd had some experiences in his life that were traumatic, and I think he really channeled those. And he was incredible. He was the actor who required the most, I wouldn't even say adjustment, because it was largely done between him and Paul as their relationship grew. And the relationship you see on screen is sort of a reflection of this kind of mentor-mentee thing that they developed on camera, on set. So, it was great. It was great to see the words come to life. It was great to see the choices and some of the nuances get teased out. It was great to see Dominic Sessa sort of become this film star in real time. It was kind of surreal. Yeah.
That's great. I've got enough questions for us on the desert island for the next 2 hours, but we've got some questions from our viewers out there. I'm gonna press this button. Okay. Let's see what we got. Boy, this guy uses some big words. Okay. Okay, here we go. Let's see if I can pronounce all these. Love all your films. The depth and breadth of each shows how resilient and pliable the medium of cinema is! Exclamation mark. Simple question. Do you outline?
I do.
Yeah.
Who does index cards?
Who outlines?
Oh, index card.
Sorry. Sorry. I was just, because I was raising my hand for not outlining.
Oh, not
Oh.
outlining.
Not outlining. Bad girl.
Yeah.
Look at
Why?
you.
I do it. I do it if
do
someone
it.
asks me. I've done it for TV before.
I know. I hate writing outlines for other people. I only like it myself. Okay. Boy, all right. I'm not loving these questions. All right, let's get one. Let's go. Okay. Oh, well, we got it. Nobody wants to answer it, but they all want it every session, so we got to do it.
Mhm.
Here we go. How did you get your script to a producer to get it greenlit, funded, and produced? We're required by law to ask that question.
Yeah.
I mean, Laura,
Yes, I just we were in the Sundance screenwriters labs, and off the back of those labs got a meeting with Emily Gatto at Shudder, and Shudder fully financed the movie. It was a fabulous dream scenario, and that makes it sound very easy, but we had been rejected 4 times from those labs. And I just wanted to say that in this room, because I think that is the longer answer is, that feels like an overnight stroke of luck, but it was years of work. And when I've had other things, when we've had other things, finance for development, it comes from 4 years of general meetings, and then the person you met 4 years ago happens to be in another place, and then you pitch it to them. So it's never as easy as the short answer makes it sound.
Yeah, and I've noticed a trend among the youth that a lot of people aren't even writing their scripts until they know where the financing is going to come from. And I think that's just appalling and ridiculous. You gotta finish a script. You gotta have a document, and accidents can happen from there. That's all I'm gonna say. Anybody else going to help these people out?
I really agree with that, because I feel like I think that, to me, sometimes the outlining or the pitching, I think the outlining for the writing script is one thing, but I feel like showing, having an outline or having a pitch or having a deck and having all these different things are ways to not get to the writing, which is the only thing that changed my life ever. Like having a finished script that somebody wants to do is a way that my life changed, and it's the way that past lives got made. It's as simple as that.
I understand daydreams that make it a little more realistic.
Sorry?
Like,
Sorry?
I understand daydreams, but you should make your daydreams a little more realistic by actually finishing a script. So you have my
You
script
have
to be made in the
to
movie.
finish the script, of course. And I think you have to finish the script. And also, like, I didn't have a short film or anything. I didn't have I didn't have a reel, right? All I had was this one staff writing job I had at Wheel of Time. So all anybody knew about me was as a writer, and I was a playwright for 10 years. So I think that's it. And something that's really true, I think, is that the script itself was also the reason I got to direct it, which is that the script was a pitch deck for what kind of a movie I wanted to make it was. And the experience of reading the script had to feel like the experience of watching the movie. So there's no amount of detail or no amount of whatever that I spared from that script. I feel like even my next script, I feel like, knowing that I'm going to direct it, knowing that it's going to get made, I feel like I don't have as much details in my script, in my next script. But this first script, because I'm also trying to express that I want this to get made and I would love to direct it. I understand if I can't, but I would love to. All of that was just built into the script as a way to be like, well, this is the story. And I know the story so completely well. But all of that, I don't think, could have happened without finishing the script. I'm always, some people tell me, like, do you want to hear a pitch for this? And do you want to talk about this pitch? And I'm always like, unfortunately, I think you can once you're a really well-established screenwriter, then you start getting jobs.
Pitches are for big people.
Pitches are people who already have like many scripts behind them. I feel like if you're trying to break into like getting your first movie made, I think it's without question that you have to just write the
back in the day, you could walk into a room and say, I have 2 words, Mr. Magoo, and it'd be different. Now, I got one.
Go ahead.
I got one I like here. Speaking strictly as screenwriters, what is a script, contemporary or classic, produced or not, that you read and made you exclaim, this is an exemplary specimen of the draft of the craft, or less pretentious version thereof? What's the movie that made you want to make movies?
That's a great question. I'll go on that one. There's a British comedy from 1987 by Bruce Robinson called With Nail and I.
Of course.
I don't know if anybody's heard of it. Has anybody here ever heard of With Nail? It's a classic. It is. I saw it when it opened, I think in October 25th, 1987 in New York at the Carnegie Cinema. And I was like, this thing is just the most dyspeptic, black, kind of like baroquely profane.
Oh my God, I can see
like
what kind of insults you
waiting
like.
for Godot comedy that I've ever seen. And I was like, can you write about people like this in this level of squalor and degradation and have it be this hilarious? And I think the bar was set so high. I mean, there are certain things that are very fraught and problematic in the script, now through the lens of where we are. But But there were also things that had happened to Bruce Robinson with a director that he'd worked with, to sort of imported into the script. But the relationship, it's a love story too. It's a love story between these two guys. Withnail and I played Marwood, played by Richard E. Grant, and then Paul McGann. And the end of it is this most beautiful elegiac kind of hilarious, sad, broken thing. And seeing that movie made me go, if you could do this in a comedy, then I want to write comedy, and I want to write comedy for film. And it took me a while, but it was that unique vision that kind of made me go, yeah, man, this is what I want to do.
Wow, that's a great answer. Laura, what's the movie?
Oh gosh. Well, I did write a report on Heathers in film school. I made a presentation about Heathers.
Oh,
I was
wow.
obsessed with it.
I hope you got an A.
I didn't. They were much more into people smoking out of windows and being friends. So, but I will say that for me, I think the one that I always come back to, and I embarrassingly have not read this screenplay, is A Serious Man. And I like looking at the Coen brothers in general because they break a lot of the rules that you're taught in Save the Cat about passivity and other things, especially in that script. And I'm Jewish, when people ask me about what Judaism means, I'm like, just go watch A Serious Man. And but yeah, I feel like that's like an onion that I could just like keep unpeeling forever to just try to understand how cinema works.
That's great. Brendan?
I've got a very teenager from the 90s answer, but I when I was little, my cousin snuck me a copy of Reservoir Dogs, and I think I was about 8 years old. And I just sat there. It was like the first time I really love movies, but it felt like listening to like the first time listening to heavy metal or something. Like it just was louder and more, and I just, something about my brain just like caught on fire. And I didn't read the screenplay until probably only a couple of years ago. And I have no idea if you're probably just reading something that's transcribed. You don't know how close you can get to like a shooting draft or anything. But it really blew me away how much was just on the page, like the specificity of everything that came out. I don't know, it's not maybe not the most creative.
No, we don't.
Really,
I
that's
can
the
be
movie.
graded unnecessary. That's good. I saw Jaws when I was 12 and walked across the street to an ice cream parlor and stood there and said, I'm gonna write movies.
No.
It's not the most, well, I wish it was Barry Lyndon, but it was Jaws. Emma, what about you? I know you got your fandoms, but is there one that you wouldn't expect?
I mean, it's so hard to say, but I feel like you say Jaws, like probably E.T. was the first movie I remember seeing in theaters when I was a kid, and I think that my taste is pretty mainstream, but like mainstream movies are loved for a reason, and I think that movie in particular, like thinking about, I don't know, the full circle now of what I want to write and what I like, that's a story. It's an adventure story, and it's a group of kids, and it's also about, family and like coming together, and also it's about fear and, the establishment, and, like
Did you just love it, or did you say, I want to create this kind of love for somebody. I want to make a movie like this.
I mean, I think I just loved it. I wanted to be a film critic for the longest time, so I can't remember having a specific movie that made me be like, oh, now I want to really direct. Like this is the movie that, so it's hard to say, because I feel like when I just wanted to write about movies, they were all just kind of going in the
I wanted to be the male falling tail growing up. Movies stopped being like movies of the 70s, so I stopped dreaming. I got to write this shit myself, I guess. So Celine, dying to know your movie.
I feel like I feel like we're all gonna be so real, because I of course have a really pretentious answers, but I'm just gonna be real. I was just, everyone's real, so I have to be real. I feel like Brendan, I feel like we just met on the Zoom, but I feel like I just know you and I could hang, because I feel like I think the first time that I even really I think I really felt something super like very vivid was Pulp Fiction, which I think makes sense that the movie that made me go like, I think I could do it in a weird way was Inglourious Bastards.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why Inglourious Bastards was the one that made me go like, why not? Why not try to do it? Like I literally like I was gonna be a psychologist. Like I was going to
Oh,
school for
man.
psychology. I
Damn
went to
it,
4 years
Tarantino
of
again.
I went to school for 4 years in psychology, and I was going to become a psychologist. And then I remember maybe it was my third year or something that I I watched Glorious Bastards. I think that was the year that it came out. And I remember just watching it and then just like I think I turned to my sister or something. And I think I was just like, I think I could do it. I think a part of it is the complete irreverence, right? As in like it kind of rewrote history. And like it didn't kind of, it fully rewrote history.
Yeah.
Not kind of, definitely rewrote history. And I was just like, and he's gonna get away with that? And
Yeah.
I was like, that's incredible. They can get away with that. And of course the answer is like, of course you can get away with that. It's a movie, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, if you can get away with that, what am I doing? What am I worried about? Right? I can get away with anything, you know? So I think in a funny way, I feel like when I think about what's a movie that made me go like, oh my God, I think it was Pulp Fiction. And I think that, but then the moment that I was like, oh my God, I have to do this thing. I want to do this thing. It's all I want to do. That feel, and I think I can get away with it. You know, the feeling of like, I think I can get away with it feeling. I think I got weirdly out of after Inglourious Basterds too.
That's amazing. But
Yeah.
God damn us, other screenwriters are so jealous of Tarantino. He gets away with everything.
Gets away with everything.
Fascinating.
Wild.
Everybody loves him.
Yeah.
I can't believe it. I don't want to go, but I think we're down to our last question, even though I haven't been told so, but I think I'm gonna say it's the last question. I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna do it. It's a multi-parter, kind of. What's the worst piece of screenwriting advice you ever received? And more importantly, what's the advice you wish someone had given you? What did you have to learn the hard way? What would you go back and tell your younger self?
I got one. It's kind of the same thing. It's a flip to that. I went to film school and I had I think mixed experience. Like I'm really, really grateful for it, but I was exposed to right off the bat a lot of, just for lack of a better word, like very pretentious, overthinking, not people who were making stuff or aspired to make stuff that was not necessarily what they were into, but what they thought would get a lot of like applause.
Oh, man.
That's I mean, everyone's had these experiences, and I really bought into that and got a little lost because I was kind of I was just kind of a shit kicker who liked movies, and I had no understanding of this wonderful, pretentious world that existed outside of there, of like cinema. And so the worst advice I ever got, I remember freshman year, like I'd started writing something and it wasn't totally put together. And someone who was in my class who wore like a lot of scarves, I was like, I want to take a look at this. And guy was like, well, I mean, let me give you some advice. Unless you're really like finished and really like ready with something, don't just share your work with anybody. Like you need to really make sure it's done and ready, like to go out into the world before just keep that to yourself until it's like perfect and ready. I'm paraphrasing, but like I really internalized that, like on top of I think regular, just like Boston Irish Catholicism, and I never wanted to share like anything with anybody. And the advice I would give my younger self is that's really dumb. You're gonna write the bad version before you write the good version. The bad version might be terrible. In fact, certainly will be. But like find your people, share that, make it better, and don't be afraid to to open up a little bit with your stuff. Don't be too precious.
Great. David?
I think definitely this commercial impulse that dominates Hollywood a lot of the time. A lot of the time you'll talk to people who are like, what are you doing? Well, R-rated comedies are really coming back, or the Western is on the rise, or this thing is about to happen. Or have you thought about doing this? Like chasing any kind of trend, doing anything that anybody tells you is what everybody is doing is a colossal mistake. Like, write the movie that you feel like you have to write. I mean, certainly if we're lucky enough to get paid gigs, sometimes you take a gig, you're like, okay, this could be something that I need to pay the mortgage, and so I'm going to do this. But I think the best work comes from, I know no one's doing X, but I'm doing X because I love it and I have to do it. I think, it's like my uncle who raised me said once, there's only one reason to get good reason to get married, and that's because you absolutely have to. Like, and I feel the same way about writing a movie. Like, because it's like a relationship you have with this picture, right? With this script. So unless you really want to get into bed with this thing and really spend time with it and wrestle with it and have a relationship with it, don't do it. I don't care who's writing what. I don't care what the hot genre is. Just do the thing you feel like you have to do and know it's going to be difficult, like a relationship. And the more you can kind of key off of that emotional truth, I think the better the screenplay is going to be. And exactly what you said, man, about like, you're going to write terrible stuff, find your people. That's the other thing. I want to draft off that because I think that's brilliant. Like, don't be afraid to show things in process to people you really trust. Listen to your heart, listen to your truth, and don't be afraid to share with friends and ask them to be gentle.
Absolutely. I compare when people come up to me and say, I hear clown movies are hot this year. Like, it's like the light of a star that's a planet that blew up 200 years ago. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
like it's if you read it in Variety, it's already dead.
Yeah, precisely. But it seems to be the governing wisdom. It drives me nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in the genre world. We just heard over and over, we're looking for the next Get Out for 6 years afterward.
Oh my God.
Like, you guys all passed on Get Out. Like, you didn't know what it
You
was.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now you want something that retroactively you find successful,
yeah.
groundbreaking, but you were afraid of it at the time.
I once heard somebody say, and this is the total truth, and this is the best way I've heard it phrased, which is, Hollywood is 1,000 people running to the spot where lightning just struck. It's going to happen right here again.
So
and
true.
it's to it. It's like, no, guys, come on.
That's great.
Oh yeah.
More bad advice, Emma?
I think I got advice once to sort of like stick within the rules of the genre. And I think that's
Well, how do genres grow?
well, like I think, like, for instance, we had a note at some point with Bottoms where there was too much violence for a high school comedy. And I just didn't care. You know what I mean? Like, I think that, like, I love genre combinations. Yeah, sometimes it can be a little confusing if you're watching like a musical, sci-fi, horror, comedy, action, like try to like stay in one lane, try to sort of make it a concise thing is really hard. But I love genre combinations. Like, I love defying and changing the rules of genres we think we've seen a million times before. I think it's so much fun. I think it surprises audiences. And I think that in talking about Hollywood people, I think like there's a lot of fear around sort of like, well, how do we market this then if it's like not a regular high school comedy, or how do we market this if it's not a regular horror movie, And I think that, audiences deserve a little bit more credit, like I think they can be wowed and be unexpectedly surprised a lot more than we think they can. So that's one. And then I think, I don't know, I think it's so cheesy, but like, not write what but like, I continue to hear sort of friends when they're writing their first scripts or whatever, saying like that their cultural or emotional or family experience is too specific. And I want to like shake them because I'm like, what you just said to me of all of this stuff in this particular world that I know nothing about is fascinating and sounds so true to you and sounds so true to what you experienced. And I know you experienced as my friend, or, as someone I know, like, and everyone will find that fascinating because the best movies, like, are ones like, and, you guys have put so much of yourself into these scripts. Like, you can tell, you know what I mean? Like, that that's a real school. Like, that that was a real date, or not date, but, night at the bar. Like anyway. So I just think that when I hear that, I want to like, I just go crazy. I'm like, well, everything that you experience is so vivid and clear to you, and everyone will relate in their own way. So I wish I told myself that sooner.
Awesome. Celine, what would you tell you in time travel machine and tell your younger self?
Well, I think that the bad advice is any advice that is about keeping you from writing something, even if it's a bad thing, right? As in like I feel like you should read this book, and I'm like, or You know, like I'm sure some of us have read the book, written the books, but I mean, like you should read this book about writing to get better at writing. And I'm like, or you could go and keep writing and keep being bad for a long time until you get better. Like I feel like it's the funny thing where like you should go take the seminar about writing. And you're like, or you could go and keep writing. Like it's like, unfortunately, I think that it's like it's any kind of advice that is about keeping you away from it or waiting for something to happen so that you then go write it. You know what I mean? Like anything that is a delaying of the inevitable, which is that you have to write something, is I think bad advice. I feel like any version of that. And I also have such a feeling of like there's something almost sinister about it, because I feel like we're all trying to keep ourselves from writing and we're keeping each other from writing by being like, maybe after this seminar I'll be a better writer. I'd go and do the seminar. And like I feel like it's weird because I think it just feel like, but at the end of the day, all I've ever felt is that no, you just can't get better. Like I went to grad school for writing and I didn't walk into grad school feeling like, wow, the grad school is gonna make me a better writer. No, me having to write a ton in an environment that is obviously safe, because like you can be bad and have it read in the room, and like all your classmates we're all bad together, so we can all enjoy it, and like we can all like learn a lot from each other, and like, wow, that was bad today, that's great. Like the safety of the grad school is what makes you better. It's, you know, like that you get to write a lot and you have classes where they demand you write a lot, so writing a lot is what makes it better. The program itself isn't going to, right, for example. So I think it's that. I think it's that. I feel like if I could give myself advice later, I think that I would say like, well, it would always be that, well, Celine, you know more than you think, or like you're more powerful than you think, or like you have more authority than you think. And I think that would always be the advice I would give, because I think that's always the truth.
Yes, yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
I talk about it. I talk about it with my friends who are like, sometimes like we're talking about like our own fears and like how people are, you know, when we're getting feedback or when we're talking about it and talking about, you know, the work we just did and the way that the world is receiving it, whatever. I think that's something that's also that I always have to remind all of us about, is that like, well, being a writer means that you are the author of the story. So there you actually know more about this story, and you have put more thought into this story, and you have put more hours and more of your soul and everything into the story than anybody else on earth, right? So you're the person who knows, right?
Yeah.
And even though the whole world is trying to, you know, gaslight you into thinking that you don't know as much as you do, you always have to be like, listen, I know what I know. Right? I know what I know. And actually, it's always going to, at the end of the day, you're always going to find out that the thing that I knew is the truth. And I experienced it over and over again as a younger, sorry.
That's
Yeah.
great sense, because sometimes I think the best advice I give my 18-year-old self is nothing. Like
Yeah.
that just telling me why something can't happen. Like I am a big believer in the power of naivete. Like that if I didn't know you're not supposed to write headers, I wouldn't have written headers, but I didn't know any better. I didn't know my first draft had to be less than 250 pages. And that Stanley Kubrick wasn't going to direct it, but I didn't need to know that right away. I think I eventually found it. Well, geez, we could go all night. You guys have been great. I mean, my questions were a little floored, but you guys gave answers that made my questions feel better. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody listening out there. I think Paul's going to take over and put this baby to bed, or maybe not, but thank you for your time, and thank you for wisdom. Even though you may not have thought you had wisdom.
Nice meeting you guys.
Thank you
so much.
guys.
So nice to meet everybody.
Bye.